Now is former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, a board member of Pfizer and Illumina, and a CNBC contributor. Welcome back, Dr. Gottlieb. Good to have you.
Thanks.
So on the question of younger adults, good news that Pfizer's going after the teens now. When it comes to younger children, which is being tested, are there different safety concerns and different dosages being tested?
Typically, FDA would look at 12 to 15, which is the age group that Pfizer, the company I'm on the board of, filed for today, as little adults. And so they do look at children differently, of course, but typically the kinds of considerations are similar. When you get below 12, you start to think about reformulating a product like this, a vaccine, because below 12, you'd probably see more immunogenicity. You'd see more of an immune reaction to the vaccine itself. So you might test a lower dose. And that's, in fact, what the companies are doing. Pfizer's doing that. Moderna is doing that as well, where they're doing what we call dose de-escalation studies, basically testing successively lower doses in younger kids to see what's the minimal dose you need to elicit an appropriate immune response. And so 12 and above, you could use the same dose typically, and this is true of a lot of vaccines. Below 12, you might look at reformulating a vaccine to lower doses, and that's in fact what's happening here.
Dr. Gottlieb, this morning there was a story that partly, well, because of all of the issues around the AstraZeneca vaccine, that France is going to offer one of the mRNA vaccines as a second dose to people that had AstraZeneca for the first dose. Does that make sense to you?
It depends on what they think the relationship is here between these side effects that they're observing and the vaccine itself. First of all, whether there's a causal relationship, but clearly the Europeans believe there could be, and so they're taking some regulatory steps. If you believe that the mechanism, if you will, of what you're observing might be immune-mediated, meaning the vaccine is triggering an immune reaction that's then eliciting this side effect, which is platelet destruction, thrombocytopenia, it might make sense because you'd see more of that immune reaction perhaps with the second dose than with the first dose. And so by sparing that second dose, you're less likely to elicit that immune reaction. I don't know that that's what the Europeans are thinking, that they think this is immune-mediated, but the kind of side effect that they're observing that they think could be related to this vaccine, which is destruction, in rare cases, thrombocytopenia, destruction of platelets, sometimes that is an immune-mediated reaction.
Dr. Gottlieb, we know how important the vaccine distribution is for the economic story in this country, obviously, but globally. I had the chance to talk to Fed Chair Jay Powell this week. Listen to what he said about the recovery and global vaccines.
The recovery, though, here remains uneven and incomplete. The burden is still falling on lower-income workers. The unemployment rate in the bottom quartile is still 20%. There's still 8.5 million people out of work. And this unevenness that we're talking about is a very serious issue. Viruses are no respecters of borders, and until the world really is vaccinated, we're all going to be at risk of new mutations, and we won't be able to really resume activity with confidence all around the world.
I thought that was a really interesting point from the Fed chair, talking about the need for global vaccinations. When is there going to be access for the global population? I think right now 0.1% of vaccines have gone to poorer countries, according to the WTO.
Yeah, look, I think you're going to see more vaccine going into low and middle income countries as we get into the second half of this year. Certainly, there's going to be more supply coming on of the mRNA vaccines, including with Pfizer. Pfizer's been working with COVAX to distribute vaccines to low-income nations. Remember, the thesis was that the viral vector vaccines, so the J&J vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine, would be the vaccines that be used in a lot of low-income countries because they were easier to distribute. They didn't require as complex storage requirements in terms of the cold chain that they needed. Now, those vaccines have run into some challenges in terms of their global distribution, J&J on supply issues and AstraZeneca on the issues that you highlighted earlier. So I think that we're going to be looking more towards the mRNA vaccines to distribute them globally. And if we are going to be doing that, we need to put in more resources into these countries to provide for that supply chain. Now, I think this is something that the U.S. government's talking about, thinking about, so I think there will be action here. I think we should be doing something on par with what we did under PEPFAR, where we pour in significant resources into low-income countries in particular to try to get the logistics in place that we're going to need to distribute these vaccines, because we might be more dependent upon the mRNA vaccines, at least for the current cycle, than we thought we would be initially.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.